The day my daughter didn't invite me to her wedding was the same day she started planning to take everything I'd ever built. I want you to sit with that for a second. Not one thing, everything. But I'm getting ahead of myself because that's not even the most infuriating part of this story. The most infuriating part, the part that still makes me grip my coffee mug a little too tight, is that I almost didn't see it coming. My name is Scott Parrish. I'm 67 years old. I live in a modest townhouse apartment on Bellevue Avenue in Newport, a place I moved into after my wife passed because the big house was just too empty. But the crown jewel of my life's work was a $2.6 million beachfront estate 2 miles down Ocean Drive. I bought it in 1991 for what people today would call a miracle price, and it's where Riley grew up. I built my life here. I did it alone after my wife Karen passed. I raised Riley alone, fed her alone, went to every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every single thing alone. And I want to be clear about something. I don't say that for sympathy. I say it so you understand what you owe me means coming from someone who grew up wanting for absolutely nothing. Welcome to Dad's Raw Revenge. Hit that like button. Drop a comment below, letting me know where you're watching from. This story is going to take you somewhere. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I always go to Flo's on Tuesdays. I was sitting at my usual spot, N booth, window facing the water, working through a lobster roll on the sports section, when my phone lit up. Not a call, not a text from Riley. A Facebook notification. Riley Ann Parrish is now Riley Ann Parrish Whitfield. I put my lobster roll down. I picked up my phone and stared at this notification the way you stare at a car accident. You don't want to look, but your brain hasn't caught up with your eyes yet. I tapped it. There she was. My daughter in a white dress on a beach in Nantucket. Nantucket, not even Newport. She couldn't even do it somewhere I'd driven her through 100 times. Laughing, holding a bouquet, her new husband Bob grinning beside her like he just won something. 112 likes, 43 comments, 0 invitations sent to her father. She looks beautiful, I thought, and I hated myself for thinking it immediately. I set the phone face down on the table. I picked my lobster roll back up. I took a bite. It tasted like absolutely nothing. Here's what you need to understand about Riley and Bob. Riley I raised. Riley I know. Riley has her mother's eyes and her grandfather's stubbornness and a way of rewriting history that should honestly be studied by academics. Bob Whitfield, 43 is, and I want to be precise here, the human equivalent of a firm handshake that goes on 3 seconds too long. Finance guy. The kind of man who calls you Scott the first time he meets you and says things like great to connect when he means hello. I never disliked Bob. I want to be fair. I just never fully trusted the way he looked at my house. The first call from Riley came 4 days after the Facebook post. Not to apologize. To explain, Dad, I know you probably saw. I did. It was very last minute. We wanted something intimate. There were 112 people in the photos. Riley. Silence. It was, look, it's complicated. Bob's family is really big, and you know what? I said, I'm not going to do this right now. Dad, congratulations, truly. You looked beautiful. I hung up. Don't give her the satisfaction of hearing you break. I walked out to my porch on Bellevue and stood there watching a sailboat cut across the harbor. And I made myself breathe like a normal human being until I actually felt like one. That took about 40 minutes. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and I need you to stay with me here because this is the part most people miss. This is where I almost got played. The calls started becoming regular after that. Riley checking in. Riley asking how I was feeling. Riley remembering suddenly that her father existed. Dad, how's the house on Ocean Drive? You keeping up with it okay? You're 67. You really should think about your long-term plan. Dad, Bob's been saying you work too hard. We worry about you. See, if you'd heard those calls, they'd have sounded loving, concerned, almost tender. But I'm 67 years old. I've been in commercial real estate for 4 decades. I have read thousands of contracts. I know a setup when I hear one. They're building something. I thought, every single time I hung up, this is a runway. They're building a runway. I just didn't know when the plane was landing. It landed on a Thursday morning in early September. They pulled into my driveway at 10 a.m. Bob had coffee from Perro Solado. Brought me one, too. Black, just how I like it. He'd looked that up, or Riley told him. Either way. Scott, Manuka is incredible in September. You're living the dream. Buddy, come in, I said. We sat in the living room. Riley kept touching things. The mantel, the bookshelf, her mother's ceramic lamp on the side table with this faraway look I hadn't seen on her before. She's not visiting. There's something else. The conversation started slowly. Bob talked about his firm. Riley asked if I'd eaten. We talked about the weather for approximately one geological era. Then Bob leaned forward, elbows on knees, and smiled. Scott, we wanted to talk to you about the Ocean Drive property. There it is. Clears throat. I said, Riley and I have been thinking. He glanced at her. She nodded. On cue. You've got this incredible asset sitting there, and with the market where it is, and with you know, getting to that stage of life. Like I was a wheel of cheese approaching expiration. It just makes sense for it to stay in the family. Riley's your only family, Scott, and we'd take care of it. We'd take real good care of it. I looked at Riley. She looked back at me with those big eyes, her mother's eyes, and said the words quietly, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing on the way over. Dad, you owe me this. I'm your only family. It should come to us. The room went absolutely silent. The harbor wind tapped the window once. Bob's smile stayed fixed, waiting. And I, Scott Parrish, 67 years old, Newport, Rhode Island, a man who has never once flipped a table, though I have thought about it. I nodded slowly, set my coffee down, and said the 4 calmest words I have ever spoken in my life. Let me make a call. Riley exhaled. She actually exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath. She thinks she just won. I walked to my study, closed the door behind me, and stood there for a moment in the quiet. Then I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in 8 months. William, I said. When he picked up, it's Scott. I need to see you. Today. If possible. Everything all right? My attorney said. I looked at the closed study door. Heard Bob say something on the other side. Heard Riley laugh. Easy, relieved. Yeah, I said quietly. Everything's fine. But here's what Riley didn't know. She didn't know about the conversation I'd had 6 weeks ago. The one that changed everything. She didn't know about the phone call I'd already made before today, before the rehearsed speech. She didn't know that I'd seen this coming since the Facebook post, and she absolutely, positively did not know what I'd already set in motion. But we're not at the detonation yet. Here's something nobody tells you about being a father. The moment you hold that baby, that tiny, screaming, completely helpless human being, you make a silent contract with the universe. You don't sign anything. Nobody witnesses it. But it's binding. More binding than anything William Reeves had ever drawn up in his 29 years of practicing law in Newport. The contract says, I will give this child everything I never had. I signed that contract in the delivery room of Newport Hospital on a February morning when Riley Ann Parrish came into the world weighing 6 pounds 4 ounces. And somewhere along the way, I'm still not entirely sure when, Riley decided the contract only ran one direction. I drove to William's office the same Thursday. Riley and Bob sat in my living room exhaling with relief. I was still holding Bob's coffee cup. I hadn't even finished it. William looked at me across his desk, then at the coffee cup, then back at me. You look like a man who just survived something, he said. Working on it, I said. How fast can you move on a property transfer? He leaned back, folded his hands. Depends on where it's going. Harbor Hope Children's Home, Over on Farewell Street. William didn't blink right away. He let the words settle like sediment. Scott, I've already talked to Director Edward Cole. He's expecting my call. When did you? 6 weeks ago. William, I started this the morning after I saw that Facebook post. Another silence. Tell me everything, he said. So, I told him about the Facebook post, the wedding I found out through the notification, about the 4 days of silence followed by Riley's phone calls that slowly, carefully, methodically started circling the Ocean Drive property like a hawk that thought it was subtle. Bob's the architect, I said. Riley's the delivery system. She knows I won't say no to her face the way I'd say no to him. She knows I look at her and I see her mother. William nodded slowly. What are you feeling, Scott? Right now, honestly, I thought about that. Tired, I said. Not angry, just tired and clear. I feel very clear. Clear how? Clear like I know exactly what I'm doing and exactly why. No fog, no second guessing. I paused. That scares you as my attorney? Little bit, William said, but he was already pulling out a legal pad. Now, let me tell you about Harbor Hope, because this isn't just where the house was going. This is where I came from, not literally. I wasn't a ward of the state, but close enough that the distinction feels academic. My father, Frank Parrish, worked the docks in Providence his whole life. Good man, quiet man. Died of a heart attack at 51 when I was 19, leaving behind a 2-bedroom house with a leaking roof, a 1974 Buick that barely started, and approximately $400 in a coffee can under the kitchen sink. My mother, Nancy Parrish, did her absolute best, which when you're a grieving widow in Providence in the early 80s with a 19-year-old son and bills that didn't care about grief, her best was considerable. She cleaned houses on the east side. I worked construction. We ate a lot of clam chowder because chowder is cheap and filling, and Newport doesn't judge you for surviving on it. I used to drive past Harbor Hope on my way to job sites. Big colonial building on Farewell Street, Newport. Kids playing in the yard behind a chain-link fence. I'd look at those kids and think, they don't have what I have. Even with everything I don't have, I have more than them. Clears throat. That thought never left me. In 1994, the year I closed on the Ocean Drive property, I wrote Harbor Hope a check for $3,000, anonymous. I sat in my truck outside the post office on Broadway, and I thought about my mother's coffee can with $400 in it, and I thought, 3,000 is something. 3,000 might matter to somebody. It became an annual thing. The amounts changed as my situation changed. By 2010, I was giving $40,000 a year. Still anonymous. Karen knew. God, she's the one who reminded me every December. But nobody else did. Not even Riley. Especially not Riley. Because I didn't do it to be admired. I did it because I owed a debt to the universe for letting me survive my 20s with my dignity intact. And anonymous payments were the only honest way to pay it. Edward Cole is 61. He's been director of Harbor Hope for 22 years. He's got the handshake of a man who means everything he says, and the eyes of someone who has watched too many children age out of the system with nowhere to go. He keeps his office spare. 1 desk, 2 chairs, a bulletin board covered in drawings kids have left over the years. I'd called him 6 weeks before on a Wednesday morning in late August, sitting on my porch on Bellevue, watching the late summer fog lift off the harbor. I told him, I will be giving the Ocean Drive property, the whole thing, plus an endowment, enough to run a residential program for kids aging out of foster care, give them a real landing place. The silence on Edward's end lasted a long time, long enough that I checked my phone to make sure the call hadn't dropped. Scott, he finally said, and his voice had shifted into something I didn't know how to categorize. Do you understand what that would mean for these kids? I think so, I said. No, he said quietly. I don't think you do. Not fully. But you will. Back in William's office, I laid it all out. Full property transfer. $2.6 million Ocean Drive house to Harbor Hope Children's Home. Irrevocable charitable trust. Additional capital endowment of $2 million. The liquid proceeds from a commercial plaza sale I was already finalizing on Thames Street. Instead of rolling it into my personal accounts, I redirected the entire payout straight into the trust, enough to fund the residential program for a generation. William wrote and didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, he looked up. Riley gets nothing? Riley gets a letter, I said, and a photograph. Scott, she told me I owed her. William, she sat in my living room and told me I owed her a $2.6 million property like she was asking me to pass the salt. She's your daughter. She is, I said, and I love her. I will love her until the day they put me in the ground. But love and debt are not the same thing, and somebody should have taught her that a long time ago. I paused. I'm teaching her now. William looked at me for a long moment. Then he clicked his pen. All right, he said. Give me 3 weeks. Those 3 weeks were the strangest of my Riley called twice. Both times warm, breezy, confident. The calls of a woman who thinks the paperwork is just a formality. Dad, Bob was thinking maybe we could come by the Ocean Drive house next weekend, just to kind of get a feel for the space. You know, start thinking about, I'll let you know. I said, oh, okay. Everything all right? Perfect, I said. How's the chowder up in Nantucket? We're back in Providence now. Dad, right, I said. Of course. I hung up and stood in my kitchen on Bellevue Avenue and allowed myself exactly 30 seconds of feeling the full weight of what I was doing. 30 seconds. Then I put the kettle on. If you have been listening for a while, drop your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button while you're at it and be sure you're subscribed. The paperwork was done on a Tuesday morning. William's office, harborside window. October light coming in flattened golden off the harbor. I signed my name in 4 places. William notarized. His assistant witnessed. William slid the folder across the desk when it was done and said nothing for a moment. Just looked at me. You okay? He said. I thought about Karen, about the February morning at Newport Hospital, about clam chowder and $400 in a coffee can and a 19-year-old kid driving past a chain-link fence watching other people's children play. Yeah, I said. I think I finally am. I shook William's hand, walked down the stairs past the jewelry store, stepped out onto Thames Street. I walked to my car. I had one more stop to make. The Ocean Drive house was empty when I got there. I walked every room for the last time, slow, no rush. The master bedroom where Karen and I used to drink coffee and watch the water on Sunday mornings. Riley's old room. Still had the purple paint she'd insisted on at age 14, which I'd hated, and then quietly grown to love. Snorts. The kitchen where I'd made approximately 10,000 breakfasts. I stood in the living room for a long time, on the wall. Karen's painting, a watercolor she'd done of the view from this exact porch. Blues and grays and a sliver of gold where the sun hit the water. I took it down carefully. Wrapped it in a moving blanket I'd brought from the truck, carried it out, locked the front door, stood there with my hand flat against the wood for just a moment. Thank you, I thought, not to anyone specific, just outward, into the air. Then I walked to my truck, put Karen's painting in the back seat, and drove away without looking in the rearview mirror. Riley called the next morning, cheerful, casual, like a woman who has no idea the ground beneath her feet already shifted. Hey, Dad, so Bob was wondering if William had drawn up any paperwork yet, because we want to make sure we're ready to call. William, I said. What? Call William's office. He has the paperwork ready. He wants you and Bob at my house this Friday morning to go over everything. A pause, something in my voice. She caught it, finally. Dad, is everything okay? I looked at Karen's painting, now hanging above the fireplace in my apartment on Bellevue. Everything's exactly the way it's supposed to be, I said. What happened to Riley and Bob Whitfield over the next 72 hours was the kind of devastating that doesn't heal clean, the kind that leaves a mark, the kind that, if you're honest with yourself at 2 a.m., with the lights off, you know you brought entirely on yourself. I know, because I watched it happen. Every single second, William had arrived at my house at 9:30 a.m. on Friday, carrying a single manila folder. He sat on my porch, sipping black coffee, waiting. At 10 a.m. sharp, they arrived. Bob got out first, wearing his casual linen blazer and a smug, victorious grin. Riley followed, holding a leather designer portfolio to hold the deed. They thought they were walking into a signing. They had no idea they were walking into an execution. "Scott, William," Bob said, stepping onto the porch with an open palm. "Glad we could get this done so quickly." William didn't shake his hand. He just slid the manila folder across the porch table. "Open it, Bob," William said. His voice was as flat as the Atlantic on a dead day. Bob's smile faltered. Just a fraction. He picked up the folder, flipped it open, and started reading. I watched his eyes scan the first page, then the second. I watched the color drain from his face so fast it looked like a physical blow. The smugness vanished, replaced by a raw, unadulterated panic. "What is this?" Bob stammered, looking up at William, his voice cracking. "This says, Harbor Hope Children's Home Irrevocable Charitable Trust." "What the hell is this? Scott?" Riley snatched the papers from his hand, her eyes darting across the text. "Dad, what did you do? Where is the deed transferred to us? There is no transfer to you." "Riley," I said, standing up calmly from my porch chair. "The Ocean Drive house was legally signed over to the charity weeks ago. It's complete, recorded with the county, and entirely irreversible." "You can't do this," Bob shouted, his professional composure completely shattering. "We had an understanding. We can contest this on grounds of there are no grounds." "Bob," I interrupted, pointing toward the front door. "Now, inside, both of you. We are going to have one last conversation." We sat in the living room, same seats as before. Bob, but different energy entirely. Before they'd come in like they owned the place. Now they sat like people waiting for a doctor to come back with fatal results. Bob was vibrating with a mixture of fury and shock, while Riley just stared at me, her chest heaving, the tears finally starting to spill over. "Dad," Riley whispered, her voice cracking on that one syllable. "Why?" And I will be honest with you, that crack almost got me. "Almost. Hold," I told myself. "Hold, Riley," I said. "I need to show you something." I reached beside my chair and picked up the shoebox. "Bob," I said his name the way you say it to a dog that's about to knock something off a table. "Quiet, final. There are no grounds. I was sound of mind, properly counseled, and acting within my complete legal rights as the sole owner of that property. You're not going to find a judge in Rhode Island who sees it differently." His jaw tightened. "We had an understanding." "We had no such thing," I said. "We had a conversation in which your wife told me I owed her my house. Those are very different things." "Dad." Riley's voice cracked on that one syllable. And I will be honest with you, that crack almost got me. Almost. "Hold," I told myself. "Hold, Riley," I said. "I need to show you something." I reached beside my chair. I'd put it there before they arrived, because I knew they were coming. And I picked up the shoebox, old Nike box, edges soft with age. I'd had it since 1987. I set it on the coffee table between us. Riley looked at it. "What is that?" "Open it," I said. She looked at Bob. He shrugged, helpless, for possibly the first time in his adult life. She leaned forward and opened the box. Inside, a photograph, a bundle of receipts held with a rubber band, a folded Newport Daily News article from 1994, and an envelope with her name on it. She picked up the photograph first. It was me, 19 years old, standing outside a job site in Providence in January. I know it was January, because you can see my breath. I'm in a jacket that wasn't warm enough, holding a hard hat, squinting into the camera. I looked tired in the specific way that young men look tired when they're carrying more than they should. Riley stared at it. "I didn't have anything then," I said quietly. "Your grandfather had just died. We had $400, a leaking roof, and a Buick that started 60% of the time. I worked construction 6 days a week. Your grandmother cleaned houses on the east side." She was still looking at the photo. "I drove past Harbor Hope every single day on my way to job sites. Every day, Riley. I looked at those kids behind that fence, and I thought, even broke, even exhausted, even with nothing, I have more than them, and someday, when I have something real, I'm going to do something about that." I nodded toward the receipts. "Those are every donation I made to Harbor Hope, starting in 1994. 30 years. Riley slowly pulled the rubber band off the bundle, looked at the first receipt, then the next. Her hands had gone very still. Bob looked over her shoulder, and I watched his face do something complicated. "Dad," Riley whispered. "These are 30 years, I said again. "Anonymous, every year, because I didn't do it to be thanked. I did it because it was a debt I owed to something bigger than myself." I leaned forward now, elbows on my knees, looking directly at my daughter. "You skipped your father at your wedding, Riley. Then you showed up days later with a coffee bribe to collect my life's work because you thought you were entitled to it," I said, my voice staying perfectly level. "I have loved you since the day you were born, but love is not a debt, and I am not a bank. The day you treated your mother's memory like a real estate transaction was the day I got clear." The room was absolutely silent. Bob, to his credit, or maybe to his shame, said nothing. "There's an envelope in there with your name on it," I said to Riley. "Take it." She reached in with a shaking hand and pulled out the envelope. Opened it. Inside, one photograph and one handwritten note. The photograph was of the Harbor Hope building on Farewell Street. Taken last week, out front. A new sign was going up. I'd been there when they installed it. Harbor Hope Legacy Center. For every child who needed a door to open, and below that, smaller, in memory of Karen Parrish. Given by Scott Parrish, Newport, Rhode Island. Riley made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Something between a breath and a sob that she immediately swallowed. She unfolded the note. I knew what it said. I'd written it at my kitchen table at 6 a.m. on a Tuesday. Rewritten it 4 times, and then wrote the final version in one sitting without stopping. It said, "Riley, your mother would have loved those kids. She would have had them all over for chowder, and would have learned every single name." That's who she was. I named the center after her because she earned it. You know why she earned it. I don't hate you. I never could. But I will not be collected. I am not an asset. I am your father. When you're ready to know the difference, I'll be on my porch. Dad, Bob tried one more time. I'll give him this. The man is persistent. Scott, look, we can still work something out here. There are legal avenues that Bob, I said, standing up. I'm going to say this once, as clearly as I know how. I looked at him directly. I am 67 years old. I built everything I own from a January paycheck and a leaking roof. I have forgotten more about real estate law than you have learned. I have an attorney who has 30 years of ironclad work behind him, and I made this decision before you ever walked into my house with that coffee. I walked to the front door, opened it. There is nothing to work out. There are no avenues. It's done. Bob looked at Riley. Riley was looking at the photograph of the Harbor Hope sign. She stood slowly, folded the note, put it in her pocket. She picked up the old photo of 19-year-old me in the Providence cold. "Can I keep this?" she asked. Quietly. "Yes," I said. She walked past me through the front door without another word. Bob straightened his jacket, looked at me with an expression I couldn't fully read. Somewhere between fury and something that might, in about 10 years, become respect. He walked out. I closed the door, stood in my hallway for a moment, then walked back inside, looked up at Karen's watercolor painting above the fireplace, the one from the Ocean Drive house, the blues and grays and that sliver of gold where the sun hit the water. "We did good," I told her, silently, the way you talk to people who can't answer anymore, but somehow still hear you. We did real good. 3 weeks later, I drove down Farewell Street on a Tuesday morning. The Harbor Hope Legacy Center was open. New paint, new sign. The chain-link fence out front had been replaced with a proper wooden one, painted white. Riley's suggestion. Actually, she'd called Edward Cole directly, which I found out later, and which cracked something open in me that I'm still working through. There were kids in the yard, teenagers mostly, 17, 18, the ones the system calls aged out, which is the cruelest bureaucratic phrase in the English language. Like childhood is a subscription that expires. I parked across the street and sat there with my coffee. One kid, tall, maybe 17, wearing a Patriots hoodie 2 sizes too big, was sitting on the front steps, reading a book. He looked up for a second, caught me looking. I raised my coffee cup. He nodded, then went back to his book. That's it, I thought. That's the whole thing right there. I still live on Bellevue Avenue. I still go to Flo's on Tuesdays. Newport in winter is quiet and cold and completely perfectly itself. And I have decided that I am also, finally, completely and perfectly myself. Riley called last month. Not about property, not about assets or timelines or transfer paperwork. She called to tell me she'd volunteered at Harbor Hope. She said one of the girls there reminded her of herself at 17. She said it quietly, like a confession. I said, "Your mother would have loved that." "Riley." She was quiet for a moment. "I know, Dad," she said. "I know she would have. Bob, I'm told, has moved on to other investments. Good. Here's what I want you to take from this. I didn't win because I took something from Riley. I won because I stopped letting her take something from me. There's a difference between a father and a bank, between love and debt, between a legacy and a transaction. I am Scott Parrish. I am 67 years old. I grew up with nothing, built something, and gave it to kids who remind me of what nothing actually looks like. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know where you're watching from. I will see you on the next one.